Welcome to WatchJojo. Today we're going to be making homemade pesto with pine nuts. So let's go over ingredients first before we begin. So we have our fresh basil. I'm doing a fairly large batch. The reason I'm doing such a large batch is because pine nuts are pretty expensive. You could substitute with like almonds, like some like kind of passive, like lighter nut. I find the flavor on these is fantastic though, and can't be beat, so that's what I'm going to use today. But I always recommend using a nut of some sort in your pesto because it just kind of gives it that extra texture, the extra flavor, plays really nicely. So we've got the pine nuts, we've got fresh garlic, plays really nicely with basil again, lemons to bring out the flavor once again, and then basil and Parmesan. There's never been a better combination of flavors. And to marry everything together, you use some olive oil, and of course salt and pepper to just round everything out. Cool, so let's begin with roasting these nuts. I'm impatient, so I'm gonna like crank it at first, and then once I feel like it's hot enough, I'm gonna reduce it. I want to cook the nuts on like a little below half, like some good heat, but I don't want a hard sear. I just want everything like it to bring out the flavors and release the oils from inside the nuts. It also makes it so they're a little softer, and that allows you to blend it a little nicer. By just kind of, I can feel the heat coming off the pan with my hands. Like obviously don't touch the pan, you'll sear yourself and that hurts like hell. So sufficiently hot, turned it down to like 4 on a scale of 10 on this oven. If you have a gas burner, A, count your blessings. Those things are amazing. And B, it saves a lot of time. Flat tops like this take a little while to heat up. Same with like if you have one of those really retro coil ovens, they still make those. Those take forever to heat up too. So just be patient or don't. Excellent. So now we're gonna roast these nuts. So I know that I had the right temperature because I can hear a really light sizzle. I'm gonna use something that's not my hands to move that around. So you see the dark bits? That's too much. Now we can. So I caught it just in the nick of time. You can see the lighter brown is good. The hard brown there is way too much. Spent too much time hunting for that bloody spoon. So I'm taking off heat. The residual heat's enough. You can see the glistening too. Like there's like, you can see almost the oil in the pan. That's coming off the nuts. I'm so mad about this. Cool, so now like most of them have that like darker brown. Some of these are overdone. The good news is there's so many flavors at play that it won't affect the dish because using your nose, you don't smell the burn. The nose knows. Through it, like what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna taste test these because these ones are a little too dark. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna like eat 1 or 2 of them. I'm gonna be like, okay, like, is the burn flavor the first flavor I taste or like the 6th flavor I taste? And that will tell me whether I can save it by using a bunch of really powerful ingredients to overpower that flavor so it's basically not existent, or if it's garbage and I need to like go through all these nuts and pick out all the ones that are seared and cry about it because pine nuts are so expensive. So for like flipping things, it's all on the wrist. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing forward and back. And while I'm doing that, I'm dropping the pan a little. Looks fancy as hell. It's actually really easily done. And it's basically the same logic as a pancake flip. Like with a pan, I can do like a more exasperated like motion going up. So I'm going out, up, and that would make it slip, especially with a lipped pan. Slip up and then catch. So you pull forward, give it momentum so it slides off, pull it back just before it slides off. Now momentum is going this way towards you, so you catch it going backwards. So that's the motion of that. The way to cut your herbs, I've touched on it in a couple of other videos, but I'll go over it again. Like, you want to be slicing through rather than chopping. No chopping allowed, because you're gonna bruise the living daylights out of your whatever herb you're using. Now in this case, I guess it like matters, doesn't matter, because like I'm emulsifying it at the end anyways, but like it's good habit, always good to practice. So if I were to slice through one of these nice and even, I'm cutting through the cells, but like nice and evenly. If I were like to chop it, you wouldn't see it right away, but between these two cuts, this one will turn brown way faster. So now I can't really use this yet. So what I'm gonna do with my basil here is I'm gonna pick all my leaves off the stem, because the stem actually has too much flavor for me to use. Like, it's too powerful and it's really hard to blend. Like, you have to really, really make your pesto a paste in order to use the stem. And then like, it's a little overpowering. So because I want to do a more rustic styled, like almost like slightly chunky pesto because of the nuts, I have to avoid using the stem. So I'm going to use all the leaves I can, all the really small ones I'm going to put together, and then all the medium large ones I'm going to make into piles, like so that they're all folded together, and I'll show you why in a moment. So like this, I can like pick off a couple of these little pieces if I want, but like this, can't use it, unfortunately. There's a certain amount of stem you can use. Like, I'm not gonna chop off that stem. That's fine. And if I wanted to be a little more quick about things, like if I were grabbing bunches, let's see if I can get a nice result here for my example. So like I pull off all these ones at once. So I ripped off all the top, and so like I still have some stem there, but that's fine. I still have some stem. These ones are like, all these leaves are connected, but that's not a lot of stem, so like that'll be fine too. What I'm trying to avoid is like the stalk, the main stalk is what I'm trying to avoid. Now that we're doing close-ups on my basil, there are people who have worked with this herb before. They're going to be like, your basil looks really rough. And that's because I kept it overnight in an environment that was too dry. I was supposed to keep it in like a moister environment, like in my fridge. Like, you have like the humidifier areas of your fridge. That's where you should keep them. I didn't, so now it's like really dry, and like presentation wise, I wouldn't really want to put too many of these leaves like on a plate as is if I was doing some fancy presentations. But like, all the rules still apply. So I'm going to show you something really cool here, just as a quick aside, called a Chiffonade Cut. And what this is just like a really nice way to garnish with your basil. So what I'm doing, I'm very thinly slicing after rolling the herbs. And notice how I'm dragging my knife across to cut rather than chopping. That makes it bruise, makes it look like crap. Nobody likes that. So the bonus point here is now my basil is like razor thin. It's very small, and it'll blend really nicely. Like, I could just go over all these now and chop both directions, like hold this way and then back again, once again using proper technique with my hand to avoid cutting myself with a knife. And you're always gonna end up with like a bunch of these little pieces, like stem, like with a little bit of stem on them. But because we're doing a pesto, we're just gonna bunch these up really tightly. And we're just gonna thinly slice these. Like, yes, we're not rolling them, but it'll work. It's all usable materials. The only stuff we didn't use was stems. And boop. Let's see how thin we can go. Was that noise not like super satisfying? So here, because I'm using such a big batch, I'm literally going to use like the whole clove. So let's peel these apart. Garbage. And as for, I've touched on a couple of other videos, but if you slice off the ends here, that's what's really going to hold on a lot of your skin here. There, acceptable. And if it's still holding on, what you can do is you can just slice through. You can just chop it in half too if you don't want to mess around too much. I like having the whole piece though, before I crush it, that is. And of course, it's hella sticky sometimes. Chop off any imperfections. Boop, boop. Add it to the good pile and just keep on going. You can use chopped garlic and oil because like it is a pesto. You are adding oil to the dish. So like it's not really a sin in my eyes. I just really like using fresh ingredients. We have our whole garlic. Once again, we're gonna be emulsifying, blending things, but because we're doing a rough pesto, I'm actually gonna slice. If you were like going for a really thin pesto, you could just like basically crush these and move on. Crushing it's enough to release the flavors. It's good enough for soup. It's good enough for anything where you don't need to physically keep the garlic, or you're turning it into a liquid basically. But in this case, we're going rough, so we need like reasonably minced garlic. We don't want to risk someone having to eat a piece of garlic this big. That sounds like a bad time. One more pass. Cool. Next up, so I'll slide this to the end here. Just drag that in. I use a pretty high grade steel knife, so I'm okay with kind of dragging it across the cutting board. I'm over it. But if you have like a thin steel blade, or you have like an incredibly sharp knife, you're just gonna dull your knife doing that. So I recommend highly against it. And now, let's do some lemons. So, trick with lemons here, I don't want any of the seeds. So I'm gonna chop around the core, because all the seeds are always gonna just be in the core of the lemon. Everything else is usable. And like, you're still gonna hit a seed or two here, but they're so easy to take out. They're all just like barely on the inside here. So you're losing almost nothing there. Boom. So now I have all this lemon with no seeds, and all the seeds are just in the core, which is pretty cool. and I'm just not going to use that core. I'm over it. So we're going to do that for all 4 of these lemons because I'm doing a ginormous batch of pesto. So now I have all my lemon. I'm literally just gonna crush all of them in here. Look at this gourmet piece of Parmesan. How good does that look? This is the only unusable part, and you get so much yield, better yield, than buying like dried Parmesan and like craft Parmesan or whatever you want to call it, like the fake Parmesan you can get that's like not even refrigerated. It's cheese that isn't refrigerated. How sketchy is that? This brick for me was like 23 bucks or something, and it's this huge piece, and I get it pretty cheap. But the benefit is, this is like literally like almost like a kilo, if not more, of Parmesan. It's dry, so it'll last longer, but you have to care for it. So you don't want to just like take this brick, throw it in my fridge, and then wonder why my $20 piece of cheese has gone bad. You want to seal it up with some saran wrap. You want to make sure it's nice and tight. You want to put it in like a kind of medium humidity environment. Like I wouldn't want to put it on high humidity, but I wouldn't want to put it like just in the fridge willy-nilly either. This is like the dark part. You can't really use it for anything. Like it's not edible, but it has a lot of flavor still. So you can let that flavor leach out into say a soup and then take it out when you're done. So I'm gonna hold on to that. For those worried about me screwing up these nuts, they're toasted. They don't taste burnt. And I'd say like that darker flavor I didn't want to really get in there. It's like 3rd or 4th. Still tastes right. So I'm going to be able to use the whole batch, which is nice. So I'm going to add all those nuts in here. And then now we're going to talk about oil. So I'm going to use olive oil. And as far as how much I'm going to use, I'm going to start with a pretty good quantity here. Just enough to kind of hydrate everything. I'm going to use a hand blender here. So the reason I'm going to do that is it allows me to control where my problem areas are rather than getting like pieces of basil stuck to the side if I were to use like a blender of some sort, like a big stand blender. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend a little bit and I'm going to add more oil. So we're just going to kind of time lapse that nonsense. Right here, I am looking to have everything fully submerged. I'm looking for it to still be liquidy, but like almost semi-solid. What's noteworthy is like this action is making it so I'm pulling and sucking up everything that's getting blended, and then I'm also kind of like bringing it to top, like I'm stirring it inwards. And what that allows me to do is kind of see the inside here and see the chunks and see if I see any chunks that I find too big. But right now, kind of just using this as like a strange ass whisk, I'm looking for chunks and I'm finding this to be like kind of the perfect level of chunky. Like there's some oil here, it's thick. So like there's some oil here, it's thick, but it's not like way too oily and it's not too like aggressively saucy. I probably could have gotten away with like a splash less of oil. However much oil you think you need always go less and then add more afterwards, because it's impossible, like right now, to be able to take away that oil. But as far as like adding, you can always add more. Right now, if I wanted to make this chunkier again, I'd have to add more ingredients. You know what's really expensive? Like all the ingredients we just used. So now we have everything blended up nicely. What I'm gonna do is I'm just kind of spoon in my salt and pepper, but I'm gonna do a kind of taste test as I go along. So like step one, let's see what it's missing. It's gonna be missing salt and pepper. So like the flavors are all very strong. They're there, but they're like separated. Like they hit 1, 2, 3 instead of together. So let's add that complexity there. Let's not even go with that dash. Let's go with a pretty hefty amount of pepper here. So I love pepper, so like I like a really peppery pesto. I find it the sharpness brings out the flavors very nicely. If you're not a huge spice fan, you're not a huge pepper fan, go with less. And of course, a little bit of salt. Salt, always use less than you think you need, because once something's too salty, you're kind of screwed. So, mix this up. Use a whisk if you have it, but I'm just gonna have to ladle this all up to get out of the container anyways. So, this is already dirty, so I'm gonna use it. Obviously, you don't want to get anyone sick, so every time you do a taste test, the spoon dies. There. I'm pretty happy with that. So that has been the pesto prep video. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.